Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
It's showtime.
It's showtime. It's doubleheader day here on the daily edition of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. We just thought we need to sort of set you up for the debate tonight, and then post-debate we'll do another show. So, and we've got lots of, thinkers in the room and folks who have lots to say. And considering that we came off of the on Northern Ontario debate on Friday, and I dipped into it, watched some of it. I went back and watched some of it again on YouTube, and I thought, that was probably better than I expected, but maybe I'm paying attention because we expect more tonight on this Family Day edition. So let's get to the table. Keith Leslie is joining us. He's a Queen's Park commentator at CHTV. Monique Smith is here from Global Public Affairs. And Tim Hudak, he is a Counsel Public Affairs partner and former PC Ontario leader. Just, I don't know if you get a chance, Tim, to dip into any of that debate on Friday. If so, what'd you think?
You know, I've been in the Northern debate as leader. So two observations on this, Dave. Number one, unless you make a big mistake, it isn't really consequential outside Northern Ontario. And that really is a PC, NDP showdown across seats there. And I suspect it's probably reinforced Doug Ford's lead. Here's the other important thing. It's practice. So Doug Ford will be in his third province-wide debate, and Marit Stiles and Bonnie Crombie have not. And the fact that you get a bit of a trial run, you get to see what works for the Premier. You should save up some bullets and some lines to use in the main debate. It actually will help Marit Stiles and Bonnie Crombie warm up.
Monique, it happened in your neck of the woods, and our friends at Cogeco were very good. I just didn't know on purpose that they poorly lit the Premier or not, or whether or not that was just an accident of design. But he was forced to defend his record in Northern Ontario.
He was. And, unfortunately, it wasn't open to the public. It was $130 a ticket, which I think is ridiculous and really limited who was in the audience. But they did talk about some issues that were important to the North. They talked about roads. They talked about healthcare. I think Doug Ford was on the defensive. I think, there were some good shots across the bow from both Bonnie and Marit. And of course, Mike Schreiner. And I think it did put the feet to the fire. I think it's unfortunate that the Premier continued his track record of not talking to local media. So after the debate, he just walked out, which I think is a slap in the face to Northern reporters and, kind of shows his lack of respect for the North.
Well, Keith, and that's been an issue I've seen that's kind of tagged him all the way through since the debate, was that he was quick to go off and do the Fox interview, but wouldn't talk to the locals in North Bay and Northern Ontario.
He hasn't done an interview with Canadian media since he called the election. And for some time before that, I mean, he's the only Premier, I think, that's never done a sit-down interview with TVO Steve Paikin. So there's, clearly this is part of the strategy. He's just not going to talk to the Canadian media. He gets much more, the Captain Canada play when he appears on the American talk shows. And they, of course, don't question him about housing or healthcare or homelessness or any of those other issues that his government hasn't done so well on. So I think we did see a very defensive Doug Ford, although he's bound to be defensive when everyone is literally attacking you at times. But he was pivoting so much to his talking points, and especially on the Trump and the tariffs talking points, that when he was pushed hard on housing and he tried to pivot right away, well, the best way to get more housing built is for me to be reelected so I can take on Donald Trump and the tariffs. The audience laughed. And for such a signature core part of their program, to have the audience laugh at that shows that, yes, the people are behind him on this fighting the Trump tariffs. But he can't use it as an excuse to deflect every single issue. And that became apparent. It must have scared, I think, a few conservatives to see him get laughed at when he tried to pivot to Trump so quickly.
Well, one of the things, the exchanges that I did note, and it was around housing, because I don't think it matters where you live in the province. Housing is a crisis and homelessness is a growing crisis. And so I just thought it was indicative perhaps of what Tim was talking about and what we might expect in the leaders' debate.
Mr. Ford has said no to every housing solution that works for people. Why? Because the interests of wealthy land speculators are more important to this government than you, the people of Ontario, struggling just to put a roof over your head. And to play politics with tariffs at a time when we should all be working across party lines, showing strength through unity to push back against Donald Trump, to distract from the failure to actually build homes and the $8.3 billion Greenbelt scandal, I believe is highly irresponsible. I'm ready to work with all of us up here.
Thanks, Mike.
Every single one of us up here to stand united against Trump's tariffs.
That's right.
And at the same time, build homes, fix healthcare, fix education, and ensure we have a strong economy.
Doug Ford, we'll give you 20 seconds to wrap up. Doug Ford.
You know, we put the Building Faster Fund that Mississauga didn't meet, but everyone else met around the area. We put $3 billion towards infrastructure to build 160,000 more homes.
Where are they,
They
Doug? Where are
voted
they?
against it. All three
Where are
parties
they?
voted against it.
It's because
Where
it
is
doesn't
it?
work.
We're making sure we
Where's the
cut
housing,
red
Doug?
tape and regulations.
1.5
All three
million
parties
homes. You didn't get it
voted
done.
against it. And honestly, with all due respect, Bonnie, you should be the last one speaking about building homes. You had the lowest builds in all
I
of
am
Ontario.
so proud of
You
my
know?
city and my
Oh
record.
my
We're gonna
Doug Ford, I'll
stop.
take my
I'll
record
tell you,
over yours any day.
Mississauga is not proud
Your
of you.
record
I'll
is a
tell you that
disaster.
right
You know
now.
what? Look at this.
Stop,
Look at
please.
this.
Thank you.
It's outrageous, these two fighting over, who's built the least housing in Ontario at a time when we have a housing and homelessness crisis in
We
the
need a
province.
word.
I don't know if that was the best moment for Merritt Stiles, but it was a good line, Tim.
It made me laugh for sure. A couple things that, first of all, as a former CEO at the Ontario Real Estate Association, I'm happy to see them talk about housing because it has really fallen off a cliff when interest rates run up. We had a really good report about how to get 1.5 million homes built, and sadly, we've fallen behind. So good to see some pressure on the government and focus on that issue. Merritt Stiles is a very likable individual. She's got a lot of energy. I think she can connect with the average folks watching. So I suspect her debate strategy tonight, at least I would advise, is try to go around the other two. Go around Ford, speak directly into the camera to people watching at home and ask them if they're better off after 6 years of the PC government. Tell stories and genuinely connect. The risk here, I think Mike Schreiner also comes across as very affable, a likable guy, and he could actually steal that opportunity away from the other two leaders.
Monique, when we look, and I've seen some of the analysis, what should the leaders be doing? I'd be curious to get your take on this as far as the Liberals are concerned, because on the one hand, I'm hearing go all in on the bullshit that is the early call, that we don't need this call, the tariffs, blah, 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 blah. Or the other extreme is go all in on healthcare. There doesn't seem to be any middle ground there. What do you think?
I think that they're going to have to pivot to the various issues that are raised. I think the inanity of this election right now is being felt by everybody today on snow day when no one can get out of their driveways. So where are we going to be on February 27th? Maybe the people south of Barrie will be okay, but I'm telling you, every senior north of Barrie is going to have a tough time getting to the polls. And I think that's appalling. I think that is tamping down on democracy. And, I just think that is wrong. So, Doug Ford's opportunistic call is just wrong. Now, for tonight at the debate, I think they have to go hard on a number of issues, on the things that he doesn't want to talk about. I mean, his body language on the northern debate, he just looked bored, like, how much longer do I have to stand here? Don't you guys know I have a Fox interview in 5 minutes? I think they've got to go after all the things that he hasn't done. I think they were strong on housing. All three leaders were strong on housing in the debate, and I think they need to continue to do that. I think they need to talk about healthcare. Absolutely. Bonnie's been strong on healthcare from the beginning, and I think she's going to continue on that. I think, talking about the Greenbelt, Mike Schreiner kind of threw it in. It got mentioned a couple times. There is so much waste in this government, and there are so many situations where Doug Ford is just making his friends rich. It's appalling. And I thought there was a missed opportunity. Just one last point, Dave. In North Bay, we had an announcement back in 2022 of $6.8 million for a new mental health or addiction center, addiction beds. 2 years later, they had hired their executive director in the first year. 2 years later, it got pulled by the Ministry of Health, and those beds were reassigned because they didn't get it built. And they'd spent a ton of money on a private developer. And that's $6.8 million in North Bay on healthcare, on addictions. That's big money. That could have solved some problems. That could have really helped a lot of people. And so those kinds of issues, I think, need to be raised, and people need to be aware, because that's hitting people where it counts.
Yeah, I get the idea, Keith, that we talk about the issues in the north and it kind of gets dismissed, anywhere south of Muskoka, so to speak, as well. That's up there. But it's important to note, as Monique points out, there are very specific issues that are particular to the north that have to be addressed up there. And it's really easy for us in Toronto to lose sight of that entirely, if not be completely unaware of them.
That's why I thought during the Northern debate that, Merritt Stiles did the absolute best in being most specific on Northern issues and showing her real knowledge of the North and the concerns in the North, especially the concerns with this government. I thought Bonnie Crombie, of course, was just trying to introduce herself. And as Tim pointed out earlier, the North is pretty much a battleground between the New Democrats and the Progressive Conservatives. So for Bonnie Crombie to, be shouting over Doug Ford there and she's just trying to get noticed and introduce herself to Ontarians. They've never seen her before. She hasn't even been in the legislature. But I think for Merritt Stiles, she was really strong, I thought, in the Northern issues in particular. And they do play out across the province, especially when you have, the Premier talking about tunneling under the 401 for 50 kilometers. How does that help anyone outside of the Greater Toronto Hamilton area? It's this strange sort of thing. I think tonight, the opposition parties, the NDP in particular, need to forget about Bonnie Crombie and focus on Ford, stay on Ford, quit trying to, raise her for second, just go at Ford. But I think all of them, Ford was, I thought, the most irritated when they brought up the hot mic situation. Remember at the beginning of the campaign, he got caught with a hot mic talking about capital punishment, bring back Sparky. And he had, it's just a bad joke. He didn't mean it. Then he was caught on, before the 2018 election, he was caught on the hot mic talking about, I'm telling developers he was going to open the Greenbelt to development, and then telling voters he wouldn't do that. And of course, then we had the hot mic on Trump. He was thrilled that Trump got elected, and then until Trump turned on us with the tariffs. All those things show that Ford says one thing in one group and something else to somebody else. And as I say, he seemed really, really irritated when that got pushed on him on Friday in the Northern debate.
Well, Tim, you on more than one occasion have pointed out how competitive Doug Ford is, and he's in it to win. And I suspect that does bug him. So how do you calm that down for him? How do you take the sting out of that? Because it's an issue that he's going to have to stick handle.
For sure. Well, you get, I'm trying to think, is it King of Surma or Sylvia Jones is the Bonnie Crombie in their practice? And so what you do is you try to out Bonnie Crombie. You make it even more aggressive, really try to get under Doug's skin. I bet you they have another rehearsal over the weekend since Friday's debate, and you're over the top to try to insulate it, right? You watch the video, as I said, is practice for Crombie and Stiles. It's also practice for Ford to watch the videos and correct that for next time. So I suspect you'll see him stay calmer. And then secondly, there's no audience. So it's a really incredible feeling, Dave, when you walk in to this debate studio and it's just you and your opponents, and we just don't have Steve Paikin. So they've got a moderator, two other journalists, and that's it, right? There's no cameramen, there's no audience. It's an isolation chamber. So that might be unnerving for the others who are used to responding to people in the audience. Keith mentioned people laughing in the last debate. That won't happen this time around. I expect to see Doug Ford improved.
Yeah, we've got David Common, Colin DeMello, and Siobhan Morris, who are going to stick handle the questions there. But back to that idea of, Keith brought up the issue of the tunnel, for example. A lot of money, emphasis being spent in this part of the province on highways. I was interested to hear how much of a concern the highway situation in Northern Ontario is. We've all driven 11 and 7, and all the single lane highways in many stretches. That seemed to me to be one of the ones that at a local level, Tim, that really kind of lit up in terms of the Premier not having the same conversation in Southern Ontario as he would otherwise be having in Northern Ontario.
Yeah, I had the honor of serving as Northern Minister, and then spent a lot of time as leader and as tourism minister across Northern Ontario. And in many ways, it does feel like a different province, right? It's more resource-based. Some communities like Thunder Bay heavily on the government side. The impact of winter and the lack of transportation infrastructure, whether that's rail or whether that's improving highways are major issues. To his credit, I mean, Doug Ford has really turned it around for the PCs. We used to only have Nipissing, and that was pretty well it. And now he has more seats than the other parties, and he takes pride in that. So I think you'll see him continue to press things like the investments that they have made, especially around mineral development, getting more jobs across Northern Ontario. He'll intensely compete to maintain the seats. In fact, they're targeting to win more.
One of the things, Monique, that we had talked about last week was the idea that if things don't kind of improve, there is this risk based on the 338 Canada modeling. Both the NDP and the Liberals appeared to have been on the margins or below the water as far as official party status in the last week. If there's anything good news for both the opposition parties, they seem to have come above the Mendoza line there, and they're in pretty good, they going in the right direction anyway. Does that assign to you that people are just starting to pay attention more than anything?
Definitely. They're definitely starting to pay more attention. I think we're starting to see the numbers shift a bit, and people are noticing that, oh my gosh, the election, like even I realize the election is next week. I mean, it's suddenly upon us and shockingly upon us. Just want to remind him that Nipissing was Liberal for a number of years, from 65 to 77 and 2003 to 2011. Not always.
Then I recruited Vic Fideli.
Oh, well,
I got it. It was my credit for my first round draft choice to Mr. Fideli.
He was already running for 8 years before that as mayor of North Bay. So it wasn't much of a recruitment, but I would just say that, to your point, Dave, I think that we're going to start to see some movement in the polls now because people are paying attention. And, I don't know how many people are actually going to tune into the debate, but there will be lots of chatter about the debate. There's our chatter today. There's tonight, your panel chatter tonight, and then all the news coverage tomorrow. So I think, suddenly it'll tweak to people that, early voting starts on Thursday this week. So it's time for people to start making up their minds. And I think it's really important for all three opposition parties to be talking about the issues that people actually care about, because the polls show that people care about housing and healthcare and the cost of living. And while we are inundated with American news and Trump and tariffs, when you talk to people about what they really care about in their lives, it's those other issues. And I think I think that's the job of the opposition leaders today in the debate, is to make sure that people are focusing on those issues and who can do the best job in those areas.
Yeah, I think the commentary typically, Keith, post-debate is the thing that sort of drives the narrative and drives the ads, and it'll be, where the spends happen and all that thing is what we'll want to watch and where the leaders are. But I thought it was interesting. It might have been Sabrina and Angie was reporting in the Queen's Park Observer last week. They were talking about voting cards not getting out in time in the mail, and Monique's already mentioned the weather. The challenge to get the vote out in this environment with some of the administrative challenges that, Elections Ontario has faced might be the story on Election Day.
Well, there's absolutely, if a government wants to lower the voter turnout as much as possible, you call an election in the middle of winter in February. You don't give Elections Ontario enough time to get the voter mail ballots mailed out to people so they can get them mailed back in time. All those sorts of things. It just seems to all play into the Tory election strategy. And quite frankly, I mean, it could be quite effective. As we know, 3 years ago, they got elected with only 18% of eligible voters. They got a huge majority government. So this is another attempt. I think, people having to go out just when it's cold and windy and snowy, you look out the door and you go, I'm not going out in that. You want to exercise your right to vote. You're going to force yourself to vote. As you say, you can't, right today in Toronto, and I'm sure in many other parts of Ontario, especially in the northern and eastern parts, you can't get down the sidewalk if you're in any way mobility challenged. I mean, you can't get out of the house, let alone get out to vote. How many people are going to be around to be able to drive you to the polling station? I mean, they can't get the cars moving around. So all these things seem to combine to just, as I say, part of a cynical strategy to lower voter turnout as much as possible and allow the Ford government to get reelected when they already had a mandate to govern for another 16 months.
Tim, do we need to break the model on the debate? Because increasingly I hear people, the debate really doesn't matter, or it doesn't get at the issues, or it doesn't deal with it effectively. And we had this conversation on Friday on the podcast, and it was more of a sense that the debates are set up to deal with issues in a very siloed, vertical way when so many issues are affected horizontally across ministries or sectors in business and so on, that we need a better model for the debate to actually get at something that's meaningful so that we're better prepared to vote.
No. That sounds like a bunch of insiders, cynics talking about. I actually look. You need to have a strong moderator who's going to try to control the debate so that people get a word in edgewise. And we saw the Northern debate, and that wasn't the case. Right? They're all talking over each other. That's not useful to voters that are making up their minds. I think Pakin was great at debates. Hopefully, David Common will do a good job tonight. No, I don't think the model's broken at all. I'll go back to some of my colleagues' comments. You know, you're right, Dave. Monique hit on this. At the beginning of the campaign, some people instantly make up my mind. I was with Doug from the get-go. And then during the campaign, there's not much that happens until the last number of days where momentum builds. You know, I remember talking to Brian Mulrooney, who told me a story about Reagan that talked about the Thursday before the Tuesday. American election's always on Tuesdays, where he could really feel the shift in 1980. First time I was elected, I didn't think I was going to win. My riding hadn't voted PC since before I was born. Be like, holy cats, these last few days, they're going to vote for me, this 27-year-old kid. What's going on? It was all for my Karras and change back then. So I think the momentum hits in the last number of days. The debate can help propel that momentum, put wind in your sails. That's how I got elected back in 95. But I don't think there is enough right now coming from the opposition parties to create that momentum.
Dave, just on that, I don't know that we want to change the format necessarily of the debates, because I think the debates allow us to talk about issues that are important to Ontarians. So they're actually going to ask questions, one would hope, about healthcare, about cost of living, about housing. And it takes, it counterbalances all the money in the world that the Tories have to spend on ads of, Doug Ford swanning about Washington. Like, we don't want to talk about Doug Ford swanning about Washington because he really has very little impact as a premier of one province of 13 in Canada. He's not breaking through there, but he wants us to believe he is. And so that's the whole narrative of his campaign. And I think the debates allow us to start having a different discussion about issues that really matter to Ontarians.
Well, except, Keith, when we get into that situation, we do get the screaming back, and I'll put my record against your record. It's all meaningless fluff, and it's exciting in terms of a clip. But for me, the format would be better to have a guy like David Common or you to sit at the chair and then fact check and ask the question and follow up and make them answer the freaking question, as opposed to flipping it off. By the way, we're talking about housing here and we're way down the road on tariffs or whatever it might be.
The Doug Ford interview that everybody wants to have in Canada that hasn't happened in months and months and months, maybe years, Keith.
Even if we did change the interview format, someone as skilled, and he's very skilled at it now, as Doug Ford, would just continually pivot to his talking points, and you really wouldn't get, even if you put, come on now, I need you back on housing, he would still come back with, well, the best way to get housing built is for me to be reelected so I can fight Donald Trump. I mean, he's just going to go that way. So I don't know if changing the format will do anything, but the debate itself is I think, pretty important. I do think this is when almost all of voters tune in. If they're going to pay any attention at all, tonight's when they're going to do it, and they're going to tune in. They want to see what everyone has to say. And heading into that, the latest poll today from Nanos for CTV has Ford and the Conservatives at 46%, the Liberals at 29%, 28, 29, and the NDP at about 18. He's got like a 19-point lead heading into the debate tonight. So as Monique said, the election is a week Thursday. It's next Thursday. This is going to come really quickly. So if there is, that's a huge amount of change of lead for an opposition party to overcome, for both opposition parties to overcome. So right now, it looks like we're in a deep race for second, unless something significantly changes in the debate tonight.
Yeah. Well, the landing gear is down. I think, Tim, we're ready to come to cruise in and hit the runway, right?
Yeah. Look, I don't like the notion of the moderators being fact checkers and to sort of babysit. That's really up to the opponents to hold you to account, to get the message out, to counter strike. It's like a referee in a hockey game. They've got to make sure you play by the rules, but you don't want them being the star of the show. Last thing, too, I'm just going to challenge this. I'm not convinced that low voter turnout is necessarily good for PCs because, look, PCs tend to do well with seniors. The snowbirds tend to be a voting flock for the PCs as well, and they're all down in Florida. So there's no doubt, I think the campaign timing was meant to help them win and control the message about Trump, but I don't think it's to suppress voter turnout. I think that actually hurts them.
Well, your lips to God's ears, Tim. And if they suppress their own vote, then good on them. But this is ridiculous that we're suppressing the vote of all Ontarians. Like, this is voter suppression. I mean, we talk about it in the States, where they challenge people's ID and all that. Putting it in the middle of a snowstorm in the middle of February and, ice and it's just ridiculous.
Well, with that, let's leave it there because I got to go and dig out the end of my driveway before I watch the debate tonight. So thanks for stepping in. Keith Leslie is here, Monique Smith, Tim Hudak, and we will be back at it right after the debate wraps tonight. So we're live on News Talk 1010 in Toronto. And if you want to listen in there, you can do so on the iHeart app. You can listen just about anywhere. Otherwise, there's a thing called the radio, and you can tune it in on the radio and check it out. Otherwise, if you're not around, we'll post that program as our daily episode of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. And just a reminder, again, if you've got something to say about the show, feel free. Go to my website, davetrafford.com, hit the talk back button, leave us your message, and we'd be happy to include it in upcoming programs. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks for this Family Day edition of the pre-debate show of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. See you.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.